All right, we are live. This is Let's Accelerate Live. I'm Michael Nichols from Bosch Innovation Consulting, and I'm on the Accelerator team. And today I have my colleague, Sara Carvalho, also on the Accelerator Program. But I think it's interesting how you actually got to the Accelerator Program to be a part of the team. So I think we're going to spend most of the session talking exactly about that. So maybe I think it could be interesting for people to understand your background at the company, maybe even where you were before Bosch, if that is possible that you worked somewhere before Bosch, and then how you ended up on this side. I think just we'll do a deep dive on how you got here.
Okay, so hello everyone. As Michael said, my name is Sara. I'm Portuguese, and I'm also on the Bosch Innovation Consulting team. But today, what we are going to talk about is how I came here and what was the project that I was doing in Africa. And just as a background, I work for Bosch already for 11 years. And before that, I worked in different companies 5 years before, mainly in also a startup for strategic marketing consultancy, also for an NGO in Portugal that's called Chapiteau, that helps young people to come back to life after they are in prison for some reason. I was working also in a pharmaceutical company as a business developer, and yes. So when I joined Bosch, I was international product manager for water heaters in Aveiro, in Portugal. And basically, my task was to manage the portfolio or the future portfolio for the water heater markets.
Maybe tell a little bit about the business unit you're in, because that will become relevant later when we're talking about your project.
Yes, so the business unit was water heatings, and we were basically inserted on the division of thermotechnology, and our mainly group of products was water heaters in the diverse forms, so either electric, gas, water heaters, heat pumps, so several number of different products. And yeah, so besides that, so this is my my professional life. On my private life, I really love to travel. And while I was still on this thermotechnology business unit, I was traveling on my private time. And in 2013, I was traveling in Peru, where I stayed at a family's house in a Lake Titicaca. So a poor part of the country. And when I arrived there, it was really cold. I was tired, and I asked them stupidly if I could have a hot shower. And they were super embarrassed because they said, well, sorry, we don't have hot water. And I was embarrassed because, I just assumed that there was hot water in the evening. And then it was when I realized that this comfort that we in the so-called Western world have, it's not available for everywhere. And these problems stick in my mind, and this family stick in my mind, that they don't have what I have on where I live. So where I lived in Portugal, and now that I'm living in Germany.
So I always had a question about this, Sara.
Yeah.
Lots of times when we get innovation projects, they say, what if the customer is not even aware that they have this pain? Was it present in the minds of the people you stayed with that they don't have this and they need it? Or was it just you sort of imposing your Western view on them that, your life would be better if you have what we have in Europe? I don't know. How did you go through that in your mind?
No, actually, so first, when I was embarrassed, I was afraid that I was touching something that I shouldn't touch. But in fact, they do something today to try to solve the problem, and that's
Okay.
the way you can see that there is really a problem there, that they are a must-have need, as we call it on the program, that they are trying to sort it out. It's just not comfortable to heat water with the firewood to, every day, so that you can take a shower or use for your chores or so. And for me, so then it was clear that it was not only my perception, it was in fact a need that they had, And of course, it's not only them in Peru, but in many other countries as well. Yeah, and then so this problem stayed in my mind. I felt uncomfortable, feeling that I was somehow privileged, that I have so many
Mm-hmm.
things on my life that other people do not have. And I was starting to think, what could Bosch do about it, since I was working on this water heaters division. And then later on in 2015, so 2 years later, I was doing an executive program at London Business School. And I was listening to a speech from Nick Youth. He was the founder of M-Pesa and M-Copa. So these are two companies in Kenya. So
Mm-hmm.
M-Pesa, basically they provide mobile payments with and transfer money from one phone to the other without being a smartphone. And it is extremely successful in Kenya. It was part of Vodafone. And nowadays, 40% of the GDP in Kenya go through this M-Pesa. So, and I met the founder of it, and he was explaining how he discovered the needs to create this kind of solution. And later on, when everything was up and running, he just created a new company called M-Copa that
Mm-hmm.
basically was selling solar energy, solar bulbs, where people would use M-Pesa to make daily payments. And while they will have these daily payments, they could use the electricity from the sun and if they couldn't afford for some reason, then the electricity will turn off until the next payment, just to make sure that this business model will be sustainable. And at that point, I was super amazed
Mm-hmm.
by his lecture. And I immediately connected the dots and said to myself, well, if M-Coppa can do it with solar energy, why cannot Bosch also do it with water heaters? And just provide products that are not affordable,
Okay.
especially for Bosch, because we are expensive due to our quality standards, but to make it affordable in a way to the customers that cannot afford such big chunks of money, and make it in a way that at the end they will still own the product and not just rent it for forever. And it was when the idea started to connect.
Like the fulminate, right? So what? So let's get the chronology. You were in Peru. How long was it between when you recognized that need, when you had this sort of spark from listening to his lecture?
2 years.
2 years, right? Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. And before that, had you tried to think of ways to solve it with existing Bosch technology, but the way we're set up with our existing channels, sales channels, products? Had you thought about it, or this just was kind of like a reminder that sparked it?
Yeah, it was in my back of my mind, but to be honest, I didn't know the solution. I had no clue how could I tackle the problem until I met Nick in this lecture at London Business School. But then,
Mm-hmm.
of course, one thing is to have an idea, another thing is to start to implementing it. What I
Correct.
did, I came back to my department and I talked with my boss and said, "Oh, I have an idea. We can do this and that." And he said, "Awesome, cool. It's a good idea, so go for it. But on your free time, because your
Mm-hmm.
tasks
In your
still
magic
need to
time,
be
right?
done." Yeah, and still, I was motivated enough to try it, and I was doing some research. What kind of countries might have these needs? Is there any infrastructure for water and hot water and so on? And but to be honest, after some months, I just had to drop it, because alone and without any clear structure on how to move forward, it wouldn't make any sense for me to continue. Yeah, and then I was I was still in Portugal, and then I was invited to come to Germany for a short-term assignment that was supposed to be just 1 year, and now I'm here for 4.5 years already. uh, and it was on a market intelligence and user experience department, still in term of technology division. And I was working there, my normal tasks, until one day my boss in Germany, he said, well, there is here a business model contest, and please go, you all, so not only me, but all my colleagues, could you please bring some ideas? And I was a bit reluctant because I didn't have much time. I was working for Germany and still for Portugal, not so much time. And I said, okay, I have this idea that I had before. Let me just quickly write it and see how it goes.
You can tell the truth today. Did you know what the word business model meant at the time to the same level of understanding you have today? Because a lot of people mix up what it means, right?
Yeah, yes.
They think business case or business plan or even a strategy. So
yeah, for me, business model back then was more connected with the revenue model only.
Correct. Yeah.
Now I know much more.
Yeah.
It's the combination of all the elements.
What I find fascinating about your story is a business model itself is just a story, right? It's the story of how you discover a need, right, and how you go about solving it. So now you got to the point in your story where I think I have a solution, right? I have a business model. So you learned about this business model. I don't know what we want to call it, a contest or a pitch, something we're not exactly great fans of, but that's how you got here. So what happened next?
Yes. So then I wrote down my idea, and we have a platform inside Bosch which is called Bosch Connect. It's some like a Facebook or LinkedIn inside Bosch for Bosch employees, and people could vote on the ideas. And for every vote that I was getting, I would receive an email. And then so many emails were popping up that I was like, oh, okay, what's going on? People are voting. And actually, I got the most votes. And because of that, me and three other ideas got a chance to present to the BV, so the board management of thermal technology. And then back then was kind of a pitch, although we don't like it. It was a pitch, so I presented, okay, this is the problem that I found out. This is a potential solution. I believe that the market is that big. And then they said, okay, good, you were convincing enough. You can move forward.
Just to get it right, did you mean Peru, South America, or did you mean somewhere else at the time?
At the
because
time,
that's where you discovered the pain, right?
True. At the time when I was doing my first calculations, I was looking to South America and Africa and Asia. So and I made a kind of a calculation of which countries have the most troubles in accessing the right infrastructures or have already mobile payments that it's easy for me to start with.
Okay.
But it was not clear back then where I would start.
Okay, so management says, good. Now what happens?
So then I also asked them, so now what? and back then, the Bosch Accelerator Program, so the program that now I'm also part of the team, was just starting the first batch. It was back in 2017, in January, when we start. And then I was told that I could join, although the application was already late for me, and I needed to get a team. And full-time commitment to do the program. And so what I tried to do was to arrange a team, and I had a very good mentor at Thermotechnology, so Julien Chanou. He was from business development, and he was helping me out to engage with human resources, with specific departments, to basically beg for some capacity, because phase one was going to be only 8 weeks. And basically I was knocking in everyone's door to get these kind of resources.
So just for background, so the reason, I'll give some context here, and the reason we ask for full commitment is because we think innovation should be treated just like the core business, right? So if you're really serious about doing innovation, then you have to devote time, resources, capacity, money. And often people will tell us, Sara, you've heard it from people at other companies, will say, I want to do something like your program. And you say, okay, well, you need to devote this much time. Like, yeah, but I don't have resources, time, money, or capacity, and I don't want to give it. So that's,
Doesn't work.
but did you understand why a full commitment was needed when at that time, or not yet?
Yes, no, definitely. I understood immediately because me alone, for sure, I couldn't do it. The difficult part was just to convince the organization to give someone to my team. So that was the difficult part. And
Yeah,
also throughout the program, I had to build 3 different teams because of these time constraints, and which is normal because if people are hired to work on these um, normal, let's say normal jobs on the core business, of course it's difficult to get to free them up for a different task that doesn't have anything to do with the core business, and
yeah,
that
exactly.
doesn't
So it's very
guarantee.
difficult, go Monday to Friday till noon, do your core business, and then for your last 3 or 4 hours of the week, make some magic, right? Beyond the core business.
Yeah,
That just
that
doesn't work,
doesn't
right?
work. No.
No.
Yeah, and what was really then interesting for me, it was easy to understand that I really needed a team. Was one of the requests for the program before the kickoff was that we would bring already, I don't remember if it was 3 or 5 customer interviews, and I remember that I called Uwe, so back then was responsible, still responsible for this batch, and I was asking him, Are you serious? Because my idea will be to do something in Kenya." And he said, yeah, you have to do some face-to-face interviews. And so, what should I, how should I do this? And then I really had very good support and creative support, let's say, from the general manager of the business unit in thermotechnology, the residential water heating, Rudiger Sauer. He basically bought a ticket for me using his miles, professional miles, that I could go fly to Kenya, and I went there alone for 2 days just to make some face-to-face interviews. And I managed. So back then I was already in contact with MCOPA, that I
Right.
thought that would be the easiest way for me to start.
So
And
MCOPA, just to remind everyone, was this NICU's company, right? That
yeah,
gave the lecture that sparked your idea.
exactly. So this
Yeah.
that offers these lighting bulbs with micropayments. And then I asked them their help to find people that I could talk to validate or to start my interviews. And I don't remember if I did 12 or 20 interviews back then. And
Right.
when I
Right.
came to the kickoff, then it was really useful because I could understand what the program was about and how difficult this will be for the next 8 weeks.
Right. And actually, Michael Boyle put a comment in the LinkedIn saying, it's a huge problem that we tend to see the world through our own eyes and from where we're sitting. So it makes no sense to validate a business idea for Africa from Stuttgart,
No,
right? You
no.
you actually even when you go there, you still have biases, right? Everybody has confirmation biases, but we'll come back to that. But you have to actually go there to experience the problem yourself and find out how does it manifest itself in Africa. Was it so? We'll get into that just in a second. So I think this is a good point to say when you start the Bosch Accelerator Program, you start with a hypothesis for the business. So maybe what we'll do here is I'll start showing everyone who's watching what that hypothesis exactly was. So just to give a recap, we'll start
Mhm.
looking at it. So when you went to Africa, you had this in your idea, and the only thing that was getting in the way was 3 interviews, and then you would make billions of euros, right?
Almost. Yeah, so my idea was basically a copy of the MCOPA model, but using our own products. And I thought, well, if we are serving people that do not have enough financial capacity to pay, it's better that I look at a Bosch portfolio and pick the cheapest product that we have to heat water, which it was an electrical instantaneous water heater. That was our cheapest product that basically works with normal electricity and it heats instantaneously. And then the payment process would be that the customer could pay on a daily basis using their mobile phone. When there will be payment, they will have hot water. When there will no payment, then we will cut the system, so until the next payment, so to guarantee that the customer will pay everything till the end. And at the end of the period, let's say 1 year, the customer will own the product and wouldn't have to pay again anything else for the hot water. So this was the original idea.
So the ambition of the Bosch Accelerator Program has always been, together with our partners at UC Berkeley, is to test new business models. So maybe you can explain to people, why was this a new business model for thermal technology? What was different about this?
Yeah, so many things were different, starting with the customer. So the type of customer segment was different, and to doing this B2C instead of B2B. That later on we can talk about it again. This was one point. Another point was to pay as you own. So we are used to just sell our products and receive the money immediately, and to have this model how to receive the money in a daily basis, not even monthly, daily basis. So this will be totally new. And again, how to connect the payments with the products that makes it work or not work, to ensure that the payment will be done till the end. So bringing this IoT to the product that is enabling a product to be affordable to a certain type of customer segment.
Just to do pay-per-use, that's very difficult for a company that works with SAP, for example.
Yes,
where you're not used to billing that way. So one of the questions in the comments, and this goes into our program, is this is a hypothesis, right? Did you understand already after doing 2 or 3 interviews that your hypothesis was, because we always say the original idea is almost 100% of the time wrong. Did you understand that yet, or did that come later?
It came later, because back then, so before the kickoff, I still didn't have in my mind the right customer segmentation groups. And as the slide just stated, it was just a guess in all the different business model blocks that later on, with more interviews I was doing, I could shape it better and reduce the uncertainties in the different blocks.
Mm-hmm. So how did you feel when we told you, it's nice that you did 2 or 3 interviews in Kenya, and
12.
Okay, 12 interviews in Kenya, and now your status is 0. Right now you have to start from 0. So this was your status.
It was.
Did you accept that it was a guess? Because I know people who come from the core, they're used to just knowing things, right? They know how their business works. There's a lot of research around how their business works, so they've seen a study, and they often take that for evidence. Was this difficult for you to accept that actually you're just guessing still at this point?
Yeah, well, it was just scary, basically, because so when you start talking with people, you start to open more areas that you still don't know.
Right.
And what at the beginning I imagined that is so obvious, then you realize that it's not that obvious and that you really need to work a lot. And basically I was just scared. Like, okay, I did this. I went there for 2 days before the kickoff. I learned a bit, but I just discovered that there is so many other things that I still need to learn. What is going to be the next 8 weeks? I don't know if I can survive that, basically.
Right. So maybe now we'll just go through slide by slide, and you can tell the story to tell us that journey of how you work through the fear, right? That's part of it. But a lot of it's really just uncertainty, right? So I have a lot of guesses. Now I have to figure out how to validate them, and how exactly do I do that? So let's go through. So tell us what that number means to you.
So this 101 was the 101 face-to-face customer interviews that me and my team conducted in Kenya during 8 weeks. And I repeat, 8 weeks. And to do this in Kenya, it's not so easy. It's not so easy.
101? Why is the 101 significant?
Well, the goal was 100 and we did one more. Okay. And to be honest, it's important because one might think that 5, 10 interviews will be enough. But to be honest, the business model just gained shape or strongest shape after interview 70 or something. And sometimes, and now that I'm on the other side, that I'm coaching with you, other teams, to do this process, many people complain that, oh, it's so difficult to get interviews and how can we do that? But to be honest, it's the only way for you to discover the truth about your business model and if you are really on the right track. And for us, it was quite a challenge because we basically in Kenya, we would spend 1-2 hours in the traffic jam just to get one interview far away. And then, summarize what was the interview, that there are so many insights, visiting people, having this infrastructure obstacles. And still in 8 weeks, we managed to do 101 customer interviews. So, and if it wasn't that, so this was basically the main task, the main metric that matter for phase one. If we wouldn't have done that, we probably wouldn't have find a problem market fit.
So walk us through how you found what we would call the problem market fit. Through your original theory of the cheapest water heater, right? And just go from there.
Okay. So when we were doing these guesses, we identified 3 possible customer segments. So one that we called Maji, and Maji was a young girl living in a rented apartment in the urban area. Another group was John, basically a bit older, I wouldn't say older because it's your age, 40 years old, married with 2 kids, living in the urban area, but owning their own house or apartment.
Mm-hmm.
And the third segment that I call Baraka, which was someone around 55 years old, married with 4 or more kids, living in the rural area, but owning their own house, which was really humble house, but still owning it. And we had these 3 different assumptions, and we just said, okay, we have to start somewhere. Let's start with the one we believe it's easier. And for us, then we started with Maji, and we scheduled several interviews with different Maji types. And we basically discovered that she actually has a water heater, electrical water heater that they call shower heads. So electrical shower head on top of your head, that when you're taking a shower, sometimes you can get electrical shocks. She was really unhappy with it. And she would be willing to change. Okay, you're moving. Yeah, exactly. She would be willing to change the current situation because it was not comfortable at all, and it was even dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And then
so that's something we often say is that the hardest thing about introducing a new business is getting people to change their current behavior, and that seemed to be the blocker with Maji, right? There was a substitute, or maybe there are other things.
Yeah, it was not mainly the behavior, was mainly a saboteur, because
Okay.
she was living
Good.
in a rented apartment, and she told us that even though she would be willing to change for a better product, even and with these micropayments, she could not do it because the landlord will basically keep her deposit if she would do any change in the house. So, and therefore we discovered that we had to speak with the landlords as well to understand if we would be interested to change something for Maji. And another thing, she was also complaining a lot about the electricity blackout, sorry.
Yeah.
Because in Kenya the electricity was not so stable, and it was also very expensive. And this started me thinking about if my initial idea of having this electrical water heater, instantaneous water heater that consumes lots of energy, would be the best choice to solve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then we interviewed the landlords, and basically he didn't care if Maggi was happy or not with this electrical shower head. The electrical shower head cost $10 to $15, and he wouldn't be willing to invest any more.
But it's a great example that discovering a need with the user is simply insufficient, right? That
True.
you had to go beyond the user that would have derived a lot of benefit from it, maybe even would have paid for it. Um, but you found out when you expanded the search throughout the ecosystem that, well, in fact, this business model will never fly.
Yeah, that's why it's really important to learn the customer ecosystem, to know exactly who is the decision maker, who is the influencer, the recommender, the saboteur, because you might be serving too well your user. So if I would just focus on what she said, yes, I would be willing to change. I would probably develop a product for her, and then later on discover that this is not working because the business model
As a
touches many as a
saboteur, right?
saboteur, and it touches many other stakeholders in the ecosystem.
There's always a saboteur, by the way. Okay,
Sometimes it's disguised, but
so then
yeah,
you went on to, I think it was John, correct?
exactly. So then we moved to the next customer segment that we believed was easier to get, the John. And John, they had electrical storage, a tank to heat the water, which consumes lots of electricity as well. And sometimes when there were the blackouts, he would be super unhappy that because although he paid for the product, it was not working when there was no electricity.
Mm-hmm.
So it was him that told us that what will be great will be a solar solution that he will not be relying on electricity anymore, and this will help him to reduce costs later on as well, because he wouldn't have to pay for electricity bills anymore. The thing was, when we were speaking about this idea of the micropayments, he thought, okay, it's interesting to split the payment, but I would prefer to pay it monthly instead
Mm-hmm.
of daily. And so we put him on hold somehow, because the original idea was these micropayments, and we decided to move on with a different customer segment.
Because it didn't exactly fit your pay-per-use model. Is that why?
Yeah, so here I was coming more from the solution part,
Yeah.
that I was thinking about these daily payments. And then when he said that he wanted to have a monthly payment, somehow it didn't fit the original idea that I
Mm-hmm.
have. Later on, when we will speak about incubation, if we have time for that, because the story is long, we came back to this customer segment, and it was one of our second segments for the scaling logic.
Right. Okay, but then something happens. What happens?
Yeah, so then we start interviewing the third customer segment, the baraka, so people that were living in the rural area, owning their own house, and we discover several pains. So they actually use hot water every day, and we discover that they use hot water, for instance, to milk the cows, which is a daily task. They spend lots of time making the fire, um, boiling the water. And sometimes this is a task that can take 1 to 2 hours per day, just to make sure that they have enough hot water available. And then they have several other pain points, like while they are having this fire to heat the water, they have some health issues, because they cough, they have itchy eyes, and it's actually not comfortable at all. And because they don't even have electricity, in many cases they don't have
Mm-hmm.
electricity where they live, um, other solution rather than solar would not be a fit for them. And they really love the idea of the micropayments, because since they are majority farmers, they do not receive a monthly salary. They receive the money as they sell eggs, milk, or other stuff. And so when they have money, they would be willing to pay to have hot water instantly. but they would love to have the freedom to stop paying if for some reason their sales of their products was not good enough.
Yeah, right. So you had very good evidence of a must-have, and the evidence that there was a must-have need was people who are with low disposable income and they're farmers were spending 1-2 hours, right, a family, right, to,
Hmm.
to solve this problem, which is that's a hell of a lot of time in their day to
Yeah, they could
solve
use to
a
do something else.
exactly, and maybe make money in a different way. I think one of the most charming stories out of that is that you had to learn to speak their language to figure out what the pay was, right? So you
True.
mentioned the eggs. Maybe tell that story. I think that's very interesting.
Yes, so it was not immediately clear that the Baraka would be the customer segment because we were having different answers. So some of them would say, "Oh, I
Mhm.
love the idea, I really want it," and some of them they say, "Are you crazy? All the money that I have is to feed up my stomach. So why are you even talking to me about this?" And then what my team and I did, we'd start to observe how much money they earn. We couldn't just ask because they don't even know, but we start observing like how many chickens they have, how many cows
Mhm.
they have, how many uh, cattle, and so on. And then we found a correlation from the barakas that said, yes, I really want a solution, I love the idea, and from the ones that said, no, I really don't care about it. And it was basically the ones who had 2 cows as a minimum, they would be the customers that will go for the solution that we were proposing. They had enough money on a daily basis to pay this small fee to buy a solar water heater. All the others, all the money that they had was just to buy food and take care of the more basic needs. So at the end, our customer segment was defined as barakas with more than 2 cows.
Exactly. What I find so fascinating about it is what that tells you is that the way the product was sold, the way that it was sold, could not be bought by this customer segment.
No.
But by tweaking the business model, right, to something like a different revenue model, right, pay per use, you could unlock a business, right? And that was what I found so fascinating about this idea in the beginning. So what happened after this?
Yeah. So, but just before
That was
that,
the from
I,
phase
I
one to
just,
phase two, right?
yes, but before that, I just want to catch what you said, because I believe that many companies do not realize
Yeah.
the massive market that is out there, especially in poor countries, because they just lack this affordability. So they just lack this access to products and services. They are not designed for them. They are not being heard about their needs. And I really believe that when companies start looking at these customer segments in not as a charity case, but as a really market potential, even the world could really change in a positive matter.
Exactly. So and we talk a lot about the core business versus explore. So exploit versus explore. And probably one of the reasons that happens is because businesses optimize for exploit or for the core. And a lot of times they're serving customers with disposable income. And so they optimize everything to that to sell product by product and then monetize it product by product.
Hmm.
And it probably never occurs to them because all their KPIs are designed around that model, that if you just tweak it a little bit, you could be opening up a much broader market just by tweaking the revenue model, unlocking a massive market, right? And that's actually, you didn't talk much about that, but that's actually what motivated you in the beginning was this social element, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I would say business with social impact,
Hmm.
because I was somehow criticized that we are not a charity, and we aren't. But I believe that it's possible to have businesses with social impact and still have this win-win situation. And yeah, this is something that really motivates me and that I'm passionate about. I think you can feel it.
I can hear it. Yeah. Good.
Yeah, I believe that there could be a very good approach for both companies and customers if one has one looks at the market with looking for the specific problems that can be solved in different ways, creative ways.
Right. And one of the things, I'll make a comment on your progress. You did all of this essentially with no solution, no technology. It was based on custom interviews. Of course, you had your business model in your head.
Yeah.
And this is very, very typical of what we see is that for the first 20, 30 interviews, people are lost. That they don't know what they're hearing. Some people like it, other people hate it, and they thought it was the same segment. And then they keep talking, they keep exploring. They get to 50, around 50, and we call that the trowel of despair, right? You think all hope is lost.
Yeah.
And then around 60, 70, every time, maybe you can confirm this, now you're on the other side, you start to see for the teams that have found something, the hope, right? And they really latch on and they really start to validate at a high speed. And then others come to the realization, all right, there's nothing really here. We have to really change directions.
Exactly. Yeah, the pivots are essential. So I did some pivots regarding the customer segment and regarding the product itself, but still the direction of the business model was being validated. Some other teams, while they are doing these exploratory tasks, they will figure out that, okay, there is a dead hand. Either they have to totally pivot or just stop the project. Doesn't make sense to continue in a project that you don't have enough evidences to move on.
Right. And over 50% of the teams that go through phase one declare themselves a no-go. Was it, I think it was around the same in your batch, right?
Yes.
How many teams moved on? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we started with 22 teams on phase one, and then 10 teams moved
10.
to phase two. Yeah.
Right. Good. So you got to go. You declared yourself a go, and you seem to have that problem market fit. So what happened next? What was the next step?
So then we started phase two, and phase two was around 6 months. And basically what we did, we created different MVPs. We created 12. Basically, we were just testing what kind of solar panel, what will be the size of the tank, will we have or not a manual pump to remove the water, how we will connect with MCOPA device to open and close the water valve when there is payments or not. Do we need a mounting structure? Will we do it on the floor or on the roof or in a different structure? And we did this with 12 customers, and we were always measuring, collecting feedback, checking these metrics that matter to really shape what will be then the best solution.
And then you ran some very interesting experiments around, are they willing to actually pay? Right?
Yes.
It's not enough that they like it. They actually need to pay for this, as you said before, to go from charity to actual viable business.
Yes. So we ran several experiments. So one of them was the market events. So before the AgroFair events, we were just talking with people in a market where people were buying vegetables and fruits and talking about the solution. And in that place, we had a 7% conversion rate. So 7% of people would sign a letter of intent saying that I want to buy the product. And then we move on to another experiment, these AgroFair events, where our customer segment was there. And we brought also a product so they could touch and feel. And with that, we got a conversion rate of 15%. So people were signing this letter of intent, I want to be the next customer. And the most interesting way to sell the product was the neighbor events. So where we basically invited people. I don't know if there is another slide. Yeah. Exactly. We invited people that had the system, so the MVP, and invite their neighbors, friends, family to see it and to talk about it, like a Tupperware party. And it was really surprising because 45% in this way, they would sign the letter of intent. And this was showing to us that the trust on the neighbor and also this social value that they would feel that they will moving up the ladder makes it even stronger. And one very interesting fact, so one time we asked a neighbor to invite 10 people, and 73 people appeared on that event.
Exactly. I think this is another wonderful example of you have to understand the ecosystem into which you're selling, right? Because if you just assume, oh, Baraka, and you're done, you would have failed. But then now you understand how people actually make buying decisions. It's in groups, right? And they trust their neighbors and in the community.
Yeah. And then we even tested during phase 2 the payments. We sold 5 systems. And the payment rate basically is the payment divided by the amount that they had to pay was extremely good. Back then was 90%. After that it was even higher, was 105% on the incubation phase. And the way I justified is 90% is because back then in Kenya there was these elections, and people were not working for some weeks because of some instabilities there. Still, they were paying, but not as fast as they would be paying after.
It was a better number than you even thought, given the context.
Yes. Yeah.
And so you got to go.
Then we got to go.
and then everything was wonderful after that. What happened after that?
Do I have time to talk about it?
Let's see. Yeah, let's briefly talk about what happened to the project after, because you initially validated, is what we say, right? You initially validated a business model. You got some paying customers. You've proven willingness to pay. Seems like you've nailed the must-have. But the journey doesn't stop, right? Because that's not big enough for an existing business unit yet. So you entered this area that I call the Bermuda Triangle. It's this time where projects go in, and they're not in the business units really yet. They're not big enough, but they're not dead. And they're trying to get big enough to be attractive for those business units. So tell us about your time in there, and some of the things maybe for those listening that you dealt with during that, and some advice maybe you would have for people that go from this initial validation to the really tough part, building the business.
Yeah, so then I entered the incubation phase without really knowing what would be then the structure on how to do it. And the idea was to create the processes, the operations, to really prepare the company to scale up this idea.
Sales,
the sales. But of course, when you try to integrate your innovative idea on the core business, you encounter several obstacles, mainly because there are still no rules on how to treat differently these explore and exploit projects. And so I was doing it running through the exploit projects perspective, so the core business with the KPIs and also with all the process and so on. And sometimes when you are doing the incubation, you are still in the experimenting mode. You still want to test what is the best marketing strategy. How can I improve the installation? How can I engage with customers? Will I use Bosch Rangers to improve the scalability? How we will manage if some customer returns, and even before that, I need to create a team. If I need some resources from a specific department, how can I ask for that support if it's not in the standards or in the process that has to have a requirement of capacity early enough. And all this process is painful to integrate. It's like a forced marriage. And I still believe it's possible to do it, but the mindset and the processes should be really clear for each type of project types. And Definitely. So we still did a lot. We basically created several processes. We created different marketing strategies. We gained lots of customers insights. We trained a sales team. But of course, especially in a country where the infrastructures are not there, this requires much more time and patience until you are ready to truly scale up. The payment rates, so the majority of the KPIs, they were extremely good. So the payment rate, as I mentioned, was 105%. So customers were paying faster than they should, than the commitment. We were learning how to make the installations more efficiently. Of course, the more you learn, you know, with these design sprints that you learn how to do, you plan and then you check again. So we were using all of this. But at the end of the day, the major problem was that the business model idea was a B2C idea, and the strategy of thermotechnology is still B2B. And then there was a point that we said, okay, without a distributor in the market, we don't want to continue this project. And unfortunately, and I'm obviously sad about it, the project didn't move on. But I think we truly learned a lot during the process, and that there is a market out there, and that one shouldn't forget the strategy of your company, so that you are sure that you are tackling the right innovations.
And then maybe to wrap it up, now you're on the other side. You mentioned at the very beginning, now you're in the accelerator team, coaching teams as they go through this. What have you learned being on the other side?
A lot. So I know the struggles that the teams have, and what I try to bring is that the teams will trust the process, trust this evidence-based process where the more the teams talk with the potential customers, the more they will learn, and the more time they will save at the end of their own lives, to not spend time in a project that at the end will not succeed, and that they can invest their time in something else that is more valuable. And my goal is always to try to help the teams to go through these obstacles, and these sometimes mental obstacles, as fast as possible, because then when you start hearing them talking about what the customer said, all the passion, all the vision of the business model is much more clear, and the chances for success are even higher. And when I say success, also when teams successfully invalidate the business model, is still a success for us, because again, they can release the resources to do something well that can be something else that is more meaningful.
All right, Sara, thanks for telling us this. I would say it's an inspirational story. If I look at the comments, it's I think that's confirmed just by listening to it. I've heard it so many times, and still every time, even though I don't look like the emotional type, I sense the same. I feel those same emotions that you have. Any last words as we sign off?
Yeah, so thank you, Michael, for the opportunity to speak about the story. And I just want to encourage teams, innovation teams that really want to test their business model ideas. Please go out there and validate, talking to customers, reduce the uncertainty before you really invest in technology development or something else, because then you will save your own time, your own life, that you can invest in something different.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.